This is Gemara and Beitzah Daf B. All the learning for this month as we begin a new Masechta. It's sponsored to the Schos Esther Ezel Basar Meir, learning the entire Chabura. Hopefully, we'll be gathering new people as we begin a new Masechta, a new Eschatshus, a new fresh, a new wonderful fire to move on to new Masechta. Should be tremendous Schos Yil Nishmas. Of course, all the Chalim and Avei Chaim Yisrael Shalom Zidin raise the Zerah, but Yinan Delete Batim with Chayzer Yisrael Mendel the Resident Jalei Shom Zomim Shavir Shechana Shmo Ben Tilo Dino Chaim Yisrael Chaim Yisrael Brachos Tom Musa Din Ener Shem Nesviv and Vekimur Nechal Yisrael Nesel Hu Ref Gos Shava Naftali Tum Mechleser B'Sok Shechali Yisrael Svos Chashidach Yisrael Chaim and the very Shemir and Bas Rizal Gittel. We begin a new Masechta's Beitzah, which of course the name is quite peculiar. Why would we call it by the item that we're discussing? It's an egg. It's a Beitzah. Why don't we call it Yom? The Masechta is all about Yantif, and just the intrigue actually is the Ari Shainim indeed that refer to it as Masechtas Yantif. That is point number one. Point number two is everyone hears I'm calling Masechtas Beitzah. That's a big fight, a big machlekes. The Yam Shel Shleima, Magen Avram. Do you say Bei'ah? Do you say Beitzah? Is it Be'im or Beitzim? Different rayas, different proofs, different misayras and customs in Klal Yisrael. But I think when it comes to the Masechta, most people do refer to it as Masechtas Beitzah. But that's what we're going to do. Maybe I'll say Bei'ah. Either way, let's get going. And of course, the bracha that we begin with is number one is more people should come and learn more Habar Tzatayra as we get closer to Rosh Hashanah. And number two is the new fire, the new desire to conquer, desire to knowledge, the desire to chazer that we have right now as we start a new Mishnah. Of course, whenever we start, we want to know every detail, every dot. That should stay with us for the entire Masechta. So with that introduction, let's begin. Beitzah shenolda b'yantif. We have an egg is born in Yantif, of course, a nostalgic world that the primary source of food was chickens, was eggs. So an egg is born in Yantif. What is the status of that egg? Says Beishamei Oimrim. Beishamei says Te'achel, you're allowed to eat it. Beishamei Beisil Oimrim, Loi Te'achel, you're not allowed to eat it. Why are you not allowed to eat it? Rashi points out, the Gemara is going to explain, and that's going to be the entire discussion of today and tomorrow. The Mishnah continues with two other seemingly random dinim of Beishamei and Beisil. Beishamei Oimrim, Beishamei says Sa'ar Bikazayis, Chavis Bikazavis. What is the quantity that you're not allowed to have midaraisa in your possession over Pesach? Beishamei says if it's sa'ar, if it's a leavening agent, yeast, then it's a kazayis and olive worth. If it's chametz, proper chametz bread, then it's a kesevis, then it's a volume of a date. Beisil says zev is zev kazayis. Both of them are the quantity of an olive. Case number two, where Beishamei and Beisil disagree. Case number three says the Mishnah sheichit chaya va'oif, and someone shechs, if someone slaughters a chaya, wild animal, va'if, or a bird, b'yantiv and yantiv. Beishamei oimim yachbar b'darkar v'yichaseh. Beishamei says you should dig up some earth, and what should you do with that earth? Of course, a decker, yichaser b'decker, a spade, a shovel. Dig up some earth in order to do the mitzvah of kisui adam. Of course, when you shecht his blood, you have to cover it with the earth. Says Beishamei, dig it up and cover it up. Beisil says nothing doing. Beisil oimrim lo yishchai, do not shecht. Unless you have some dirt prepared during the day. But Beitzah admits, Shimshachat, if you're ready to shechted, then Shimshachat, Sheyichbar B'dakar V'yichasa, that you should dig and cover it up. She'efer Kira Muchanu, the reason being, the Mishnah concludes, something that we're going to have to see in the Gemara, the Mishnah almost random, that the ashes of a stove are considered prepared, which we're going to discuss in the Gemara. Let's just see one very, very important Rashi. Rashi in the second line is bothered by the question that everyone here is bothered by. This Mishnah is random. The first in the Mishnah, an egg born in Yantif, that's going to be the entire discussion of today. Four different opinions. What exactly is that machlekes? Why did Beishamei say you can eat it? Why does Beisil say you cannot eat it? But comes along Rashi, and Rashi says, what are the other two din? And what are these three random machlekes Beishamei Beisil? Says Rashi, the second line, Mishad the honey, it's last mili. These three entities, having made kulei Beishamei Mechumei Beisil. This breaks the rule. Usually, who's the mekel? Beisilo, which generally is the psak halacha. Who's the machmer? Who is stringent? Beishamai. But our case is different. This is three unique cases that Beishamai is lenient, Beisilo is stringent. Gabe Yantif with regard to Yantif, and therefore the Mishnah Tanalu Gabi Adadi listed them together. So point number one, we have three dinim in our Mishnah, three machlekes Beishamai Beisilo. Why? Because these are three cases with regard to halachas of Yantif. That Beishamai is lenient and Beisilo is stringent. Number one. Number two is one of the three cases. We'll go backwards because we're going to end with the first case, which we're going to discuss. The last two cases in the Mishnah of someone shechs an animal. How do you do kisi adam? How do you cover it up? Are you allowed to dig up some earth? Says Beishamai yes. Says Beisilel no. Beisil agrees, if you did it already, then you cover it up. The second case is what quantity of chametz. This should hopefully be a bit familiar for those who've been with us since the beginning. This is Gemara in Pesachim. What quantity of leavening agent of yeast or of chametz are you obligated midaraisa? Beis Shammai says when it comes to leavening agent, it's a kazayis. When it comes to a chametz, it's a kesevis, a date. Beisil says they're both a kazayis, a smaller quantity. And finally, the first case of the Mishnah. And from there, we're going to go straight into the Gemara because that's going to be the discussion of the day. An egg that is born on Yantif. What are you allowed to do with that egg? Beis Shammai says, yummy, eat it. Beisil says, do not eat it. And there's one last point before we continue. We'll see the question. Taisus is bothered, asks Taisus, why does it not say, oisinu maitirim? The Mishnah is very funny. The Mishnah says, Beis Shammai says, eat it. Beisil says, don't eat it. That's a funny way of talking. Usually Beis Shammai would say, it's aser. Beisil would say, it's aser. Beis Shammai would say, it's mutter. Taisus has his answers. Let's go strong into the Gemara. Says the Gemara, b'mai askinon. What type of chicken or hen, to be more precise, are we discussing in the Mishnah? If you're going to tell me it's a hen that's waiting to be eaten, it's a chicken that you're going to slaughter and eat it. Why does Beis Hillel say that the egg that came out of that chicken, you're not allowed to eat it? It's a piece of the chicken. The chicken is food, it's prepared for Yantif. The egg is food, it's a piece, it's almost like separating food from food. It's separating a piece of the food. So why would Beis Hillel say it's a problem to eat that on Yantif? So what must the case be? It must be it's a hen that's sitting aside for the eggs, and therefore it's not going to be used on Yantif. So my time I Beis Shammai. So what's the reason of Beis Shammai? Muksa. It should be muksa. This egg is no usage. You're not going to eat this hen. So what's the reason Beis Shammai says that the eggs that come out of this item you're allowed to eat? So says the Gemara, what is the case of the Mishnah? It asks the Gemara, one second. Well, my kushya, what's bothering you? Dilma, Beis Shammai lesu muksa. You asked me that if you're discussing a hen, a chicken, that is not set aside for Yantif, that's waiting for its eggs. Beis Shammai, why do you allow me to eat the eggs? It should be muksa. Maybe Beis Shammai holds there's no such thing as muksa. And now the Gemara explains, Kasal Kadaitin. We think right now, afilu man deshari b'muksa. There is an opinion. We're going to see in one moment the opinion of Rav Shimon. There is an opinion that holds that there's no din of muksa. But the Gemara says we assume right now, even the opinion that holds there's no such thing as muksa, bin noilad aser. But noilad, which is a higher level of muksa. What is noilad? Noilad is something that is created, something that came from thin air, something that is a new entity entirely. We think everyone agrees that is aser. So says the Gemara, if this hen is not set aside for Yantif, it's a hen for chickens, why would Beis Shammai let me eat the egg? Even if Beis Shammai holds that there's no such invention of muksa, he should agree that there is an invention of nailad. Of course, muksa being the din derabanan that we learned extensively in the Gemara and Shabbos, the din derabanan forbidding certain movements of items, not touching. Of course, we mentioned this many times. Touching is not forbidden. It's moving items, moving forbidden items, moving items like electricity, items like computers and whatnot. Movement is the isser of muksa. So says the Gemara, but we think that the one that holds there's no such thing of muksa agrees there's an entity of noilad when something is created from nothing. So even if Beis Shammai does not hold the muksa, the egg should be a new entity and therefore should yes be a problem to move it. So why does Beis Shammai let you move this egg on Yantif? That is the question of the Gemara. Now we're going to have 4 different answers to answer this question. We're going to start with Rav Nachman, and we're going to move along throughout the rest of today with 4 answers. Tomorrow we're going to actually have the cross-reference. Tomorrow is going to be the debate, 4 opinions back and forth, who holds what and what holds who. But number 1 says the Gemara. Again, we're trying to figure out what is case 1 in our Mishnah. The debate with regard to an egg that is born in Yantif. Beis Shammai says you can eat, Beis Hillel says you cannot eat. What is the case? Is it an egg from a chicken that is set aside for chicken to eat? So why is a problem eating the egg? Is it a hen that is set aside for chicken, for eggs, so why did Beis Shammai let you eat it? It should be muksa. Omar Rav Nachman, answer number 1, really it's a hen that's set aside for eggs, and therefore it should yes be muksa. You should not be allowed to touch it. But explains the Gemara, the islay muksa, Islay noilad. If you hold as a concept of muksa, then you're going to hold as a concept of noilad. However, the leslay muksa, leslay noilad. The opinion that holds there's no such thing as muksa, like we'll see in a moment, the opinion of Rav Shimon is going to hold there's no such thing as noilad. And the Gemara explains, Beis Shammai Rav Shimon that holds there's no such thing of muksa, there's no such thing of noilad. So just like the chicken is no problem, the eggs are going to be no problem, even though they have absolutely no usage. But just like there's no muksa, there's going to be no noilad. Ubeis Hillel ki Rav Yehuda. Period. Answer number one. Answer of Rav Nachman that we're discussing in Tarnagolis that's really for the eggs. It should be muksa. We don't hold them muksa like Rav Shimon. We don't hold them noilad. That's why Beis Shammai allows you to eat those eggs on Yom Tov. Asks the Gemara a bit of a, we'll call it a side question on the opinion of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, Hachi. Does Rav Nachman subscribe to that which we just said? But tonight we learn to the Mishnah Beis Shammai Omer. Says Beis Shammai, you have muksa items, you have bones, you have shells, item with no usage sitting on your table. What are you meant to do? You cracked open a shell, the shell's on the table, you allowed to pick it up? Of course not. There's no muksa. It's like a rock. It's a muksa. You're not allowed to touch it. Says Beis Shammai, no problem. You're allowed to pick up the bones and the shells on the table. Says Beis, no way. It's muksa. Pick up the whole table and shake it all off. And this is the question because Rav Nachman himself is the one explaining. Beis Shammai holds like Rav Yehuda, who yes holds a muksa. Beis Hillel ki Rav Shammai, and Beis Hillel is going to be like the opinion of Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel holds like, excuse me, I don't know what I just said. One more time. Beis Shammai ki Rav Yehuda, Beis Hillel ki Rav Shimon. Excuse me. Beis Hillel holds like Rav Shimon, and therefore you're allowed to move it, whereas Beis Shammai does not. Meaning, what is Rav Nachman saying? The Beitzah just said, Beis Hillel says, pick up the whole table, don't touch it. Beis Shammai says, pick it up. Says Rav Nachman, you got it all wrong. Absolutely not. Says Rav Nachman, no, you know what really it's supposed to say? The Beis Hillel holds like Rav Shimon that you're allowed to pick it up. Beis Shammai holds like Rav Yehuda that you're not allowed to pick it up. So what's the question? We just said a moment ago that Beis Shammai goes with the opinion of Rav Shimon, that there's no muksa, there's no noilad, but we see that Rav Nachman himself explains that Beis Hillel is one that holds like Rav Shimon. Rav Nachman is a fundamental difference between the Mishnah we just quoted about picking up the table with the bones and the shells and our Mishnah. Explains Rav Nachman, Gabi Shabbos. The second Mishnah we just quoted is a halacha of Shabbos. There's Rav Shimon. There's a stam Mishnah. There's an unauthored Mishnah, a Mishnah that seemingly everyone agrees like Rav Shimon. So I'm going to subscribe to that opinion, Beis Hillel, because we pass like Beis Hillel. So if it's stam Mishnah that says straight up a din by Shabbos that there's no muksa, so I'm going to say that's Rav Shimon, which is Beis Hillel. Like we learned in the Mishnah, you're allowed to cut up gourds before an animal on Shabbos for the animal to eat. You're allowed to cut up a carcass before the dogs. And we explain, says Rav Nachman, Mukim la Beis Hillel Rav Shimon. We want it to be a psak halacha. It's a stam Mishnah without any names. So who is that going to be? Like Beis Hillel. Beautiful. That's why in the Mishnah, when it comes to picking up the table, says Rav Nachman, I was the one that explained to you that Beis Hillel is lenient. Because he goes to Rav Shimon. Avol turning over to Beis Amid Beis. Gabe Yontif. With regard to Yontif, our Mishnah, there's a different stam Mishnah. There's a different stam Mishnah like Rebbe Yehuda, the Machmir, the stringent opinion that there's yes muksa. Therefore, I'm going to subscribe that, to Beis Shammai. Says the Mishnah, you're not allowed to cut open wood from beams on Yontif for firewood, from, and you're not allowed to cut it, veloy, you're not allowed to cut from a beam, that broken Yontif. So says Rav Nachman, Mukim la Beis Hillel Rav Yehuda. Again, whenever we have, I think I said it wrong before, so let me say it right now. Whenever we have a stam Mishnah, who do we want a stam Mishnah to be like? Beis Hillel, of course, because that's the psak halacha. So when it comes to Shabbos, we have a stam Mishnah going with Rav Shimon, the lenient opinion. Who's that going to be like? Beis Hillel. By Yontif, we have a Stam Mishnah going to Rav Yehuda, the stringent opinion. Who's going to be like? Beis Hillel. So says the Gemara, you can't ask a contradiction between the opinion of Rav Nachman because there's a fundamental difference. When it comes to Yontif, we're going to say that Beis Hillel holds like Rav Yehuda. And therefore our Mishnah that we started with, we're trying to figure out what's the story with this egg born in Yontif. Beis Shammai said you're allowed to eat it. We're going to go, who is that like? Rav Shimon. Everything is beautiful. Again, or what we just quoted by Yontif right here on the top of Amid Beis, we're saying is Rabbi Yehuda is Beis Hillel, which means our Mishnah, who's going to hold that you're not allowed to eat the egg? Beis Hillel, like Rabbi Yehuda. Who's going to hold you're allowed to eat the egg? Beis Shammai, like Rav Shimon. Everything is good and dandy. The other Mishnah about Shabbos, that's going to be Beis Hillel going with Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, beautiful answer. Rav Nachman, beautiful, eloquent, but mechti. 1 second, says the Gemara. Man sas meilemas nisan. You just told me, whenever we have a Stam Mishnah, we take on different opinions. One's Rav Yehuda, one's Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, who is the author of a Stam Mishnah? Of course, it's Rebbe, it's Rav Yehuda Nasi, the one that compiled all of the Mishnayos. Mishnah Shabbos is us like Rav Shimon. Mishnah Yontif is us like Rav Yehuda. There's a person who authored a Stam Mishnah, and that person, Rebbe, he's now in contradiction. Does he hold like Rav Yehuda, Rav Shimon? What's going on? Answers the Gemara, classical teretz. Amri, they answered 7 lines in the top. First one line is Shabbos, Beis Amid Beis. Shabbos de Chamira. When Shabbos, which is more stringent, and therefore every time you have a stringency, there's 2 halves of the coin. On one half, we want to be machmir, on the other half, we know you're playing with fire, so you're not going to play with it. So Shabbos de Chamira, no one's going to cheapen Shabbos. It's so chamer. It's skila. We throw you off a cliff if you're over. So Sasa like Rav Shimon. We went with Rav Shimon to make a loose lenient. Yontif to kill. Yontif, which has inherent kulas, inherent leniencies built into it. So is more of a concern one might come to cheapen. Yontif, sus like Rav Yehuda, de machmir. So even though it's the same person, by Shabbos he feels that it's okay to be makel like Rav Shimon. On Yontif he had to be machmir. And that is so far teretz number 1, explaining our Mishnah. Rav Nachman explaining that we're dealing with the dinim of muksa, the one that holds a muksa, holds a noilad, no muksa, no noilad. Our Mishnah Beis Shammai is going with Rav Shimon, no muksa, no noilad, eat the egg, even though it's a chicken, a hen that is set aside for eggs. Says the Gemara, you just told me, what was teretz number 1? What was Rav Nachman? It's a hen, a chicken set aside for raising eggs. That's how you explained it. Umisha muksa. And the machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is the debate centering around muksa. He asked the Gemara a bomb question. Why are you debating about the egg? Debate about the hen, the chicken itself. It's the exact same thing. The chicken itself is muksa. So why is the Masechta start the Beitzah Shenolda B'Yontif? Say the Tarnagailes. What's its status? Answers the Gemara, you know why? It's an even bigger chiddush. Not only is Beis Shammai mekel by muksa, not only would Beis Shammai hold that the tarnagailes, the hen which is set aside for eggs, is not muksa, Beis Shammai even allows you to eat the egg, which is nailad, which is a new creation. That's a much bigger novelty. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Maybe we should say the other way. Argue about the chicken, the hen, which shows us that Beis Hillel show his stringency, that even by the hen, Beis Hillel is machmir. Maybe he'll suggest, we know it's more difficult to be makel, a concept we spoke about many times. And actually, this is a Rashi we need to see. We've referenced many times. Let's wait one more moment. But ask the Gemara, I don't understand. Just argue about both. And tell me, and therefore the Gemara is very bothered that according to Rav Nachman's explanation, why does our Mishnah hone in and zoom in and zero in on the Beitzah? Say the same machlek is about the chicken, and it should have said the Tarnagolis and the Beitzim. That is the machlekes. That is the question on Rav Nachman. So teretz number 1 is from Nachman. Now we have the question. Ella Amar Rabba is going to be teretz number 2. Before we continue, I know we're short on time. We must see one Rashi. Rashi says that Atira Adifle. Says Rashi, Toiv loy lashminu koyach divrei amatir. Shusoymech al shmosai, who relies on that which he learned from his Rebbe. Ve'eino yori lahatir. He's not nervous to be mekel. Aval koyach ha'isrim. Eino yiraya. It's not difficult to be stringent. Sha'akol yachol lachmer. Va'afilu b'davar hamoter. Anyone can be machmer. Believe it's a Rashi we mentioned many times. Rashi honing in and explaining. Why is koyach Atira Adif? Because it's more difficult. You have to have something to rely upon in order to be lenient. Says the Gemara, and now we're going to conclude with the second, third, and fourth answers of our Mishnah. Ella Amar Rabba. Comes along Rabba, we're in the second half of Amud Beis. About 20 lines to the bottom. First one line is Amar. Again, we're trying to figure out what is the case in the Mishnah, the case of Beitzah Shenol de B'yant. If the Machlekes Beis Shammai says eat, Beis Hillel says no way. What is that case? Ela Amar Rav Eloim Tarnagodes Amudus Achila. The exact opposite. We're done with a chicken that's ready to eat. So there's no muksa. So why is Beis Hillel say you can't eat the egg? Ubeyant if Shechal Yos Achar Shabbos Askinan. We're talking about Yantiv, which is after Shabbos. Shabbos and Yantiv is on a Sunday. So why does Beis Hillel say you can't eat that egg? Umishom achana, a new concept. Because it's an issue that it's not prepared. That egg is not prepared. What does that mean? V'kasava rabba kol Beitzah demisyalda ha'ina me'etmol gamrula. When an egg is born today, when was that egg created? Yesterday. Says Rabba, there's a new din. A din of achana de rabbas, we're going to see in 1 second, which tells us everything has to be set aside and prepared before Shabbos and Yantif. And therefore, if something is prepared on Shabbos for Yantif, it's a serious violation. And says Beis Hillel, I'm going with Rabbah, and therefore, since the egg was created on Shabbos, born on Sunday, it's an issue of achana. As the Gemara now explains, Rabbah goes according to his reasoning. What is the meaning of the pasuk that says the and it was on day number 6, and they prepared all that which they should bring, that you should prepare the man which they're going to bring. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, Chol mechan the Shabbos, v'chol mechan the Yantif. We're teaching a very fundamental idea. On Friday is when you prepare the man on Friday for Shabbos, prepare for Yantif. However, vein Yantif mechan the Shabbos, and Yantif Shabbos mechin the Yantif. So says Rabbi, anything which is prepared, even though it was prepared by God, by Hashem Himself, because the egg was sitting inside the hen, and that's when it was prepared on Shabbos. But that's a violation of achana, and that's the reason why Beis Hillel does not allow you to eat it. So even though it's a hen, a chicken set aside for eating, and therefore it's not muksa, the egg is a new reason why it's muksa, says Beis Hillel. You know why? Because it's a violation of achana. A din da'oraisa, says Rabba, learned out from the pasuk you have to prepare everything before Shabbos and Yantif, and this egg was not. It was prepared on Shabbos for Yantif. That's why it is forbidden, says Beis Hillel. Amar le Abaye, as Abaye Yelamiata. 1 second. Yantif be'alma tishtri, says Abaye, if an egg is laid on a regular Yantif, not on a Sunday, it should end up being mutter. The whole din in the Mishnah, the way that you, Rabbi, just explained, is only Shabbos after Yantif after Shabbos, Because then the creation was the day before on Shabbos. But let's say it's a Tuesday, and an egg is born on Tuesday. It's a come out, according to you, Rabbi, it's mutter. But the Mishnah said, Beitzah Shenol de B'yantif is an issue. According to you, Rabbi, an egg born on Yantif, which is Tuesday, should be mutter, because when was it prepared? When was the achana? Yesterday on a weekday. Answers Rabbah, no, I agree, that case is aser. Beis Hillel agrees it's aser. The Mishnah is precise. It says Beitzah Shenol de B'yantif in all cases aser. You know why? Gezeira mishum Yantif achar Shabbos. We make a Gezeira decree. Any time an egg is born in Yantif is forbidden because of the case of an egg which is born after Shabbos. Says the Gemara, great. I have another question asked about you. Shabbos Damo Tishtri. What about a regular Shabbos? An egg born in Shabbos is going to come out, is going to be mutter. Answers Rabba again, no, it's still aser. Gezeira mishum Shabbos achar Yantif, another Gezeira. Asks the Gemara 1 second, do we make such a Gezeira? Asks Abaye. V'atani, we learned in a Beitzah. Hashoich, and it's a Beitzim Gemurois. You shech the hen, and you find inside the hen full eggs, are you allowed to eat the eggs that you found inside the hen that you shechted? A bit of a tongue twister. Says the Beitzah, yes. Mutar is l'achlan b'yantiv, you're allowed to eat it. But says the Abaye to Rabba, Vim Isa, that what you Rabba just taught me, why don't you make a Gezeira on those? If you told me you're making Gezeira Yantiv after Shabbos, make Gezeira Shabbos on itself, so you should make there should be a Gezeira on this case as well, that the eggs inside the mother should also be forbidden. So the Rabba answers answers, Amar Lei, Beitzah's Gemuras b'meiran, b'meiman, milsa d'leishchicha. Eggs inside a mami are not common. It's not normal, it's not a regular case to shech the chicken and find it inside full of eggs. And therefore milsa d'leishchicha legazu b'rabbanan, says Rabba, fundamentally, a fundamental rule, something which is abnormal, we don't make gezeras. So a case of Yontiv on Sunday, and then we'll make, a case of Yontiv on Sunday, that's the Isra of Achana, because the egg was formed on Shabbos. A case of Yontiv on a Tuesday, we make a gezerah. A case of Yontiv on a case of a Shabbos egg born, we make a gezerah. A case when you find an egg inside the chicken, no gezerah, because it's an abnormal case. That is teretz number 2 in our Mishnah, the answer of Rabbah. The Gemara goes with a third teretz. The truth is, I realize, let's pause over here with Rav Yosef, teretz number 3. Tomorrow we're going to see teretz number 3 and teretz number 4, and then we'll have the cross